to the human body, for example, the more that science unpackage this wonderful DNA research, they actually move forward closer, ever closer to the understanding that we did come from one parent. In fact, it has been stated by scientists as a result of their DNA research that certainly, yes, every man and woman has come from one mother and one father at the beginning of this world. Now, that doesn't sound like evolution to me. That actually sounds like in the beginning God created the heaven and earth, and on the sixth day He created man in His own image. That's what it sounds like. But as I say, the Bible, as science moves along, it is coming closer and closer to be in harmony with the biblical account of creation. Let's go there now. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1 it says this: in the beginning God created what? Created the heaven and the earth. And then in chapter 1 verse 26 God says, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So God, the great designer, God, the life giver, created everything. And over again, as I said, everything was good. Everything was fine. It didn't need to be improved upon. And what I'd like to do now is just give you an example of this. Because when we study evolutionary thought, we never ever come across a short-necked, a short-legged giraffe. They're not there. They just don't exist. What we have to understand about giraffes, as far as evolutionary science is concerned, is they've always had long necks and they've always had long legs. And it's remarkable when you see a giraffe when it actually begins to drink, because what we see here is tremendous evidence for the biblical account of creation. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. You see, when a giraffe has a drink, it does a number of things. First of all, it bows its head, but it begins to spread its legs wide open. Now, this has a number of effects. First of all, it slows down the heart rate in the giraffe. Now, you know that giraffes have got big hearts, and to pump the blood up to the brain, there's a tremendous amount of power and there's a tremendous amount of pressure. But when the giraffe bends down to drink water, as it spreads its leg, the heart rate of the giraffe immediately slows down. Then on top of that, in the neck, there are valves that close over. And then at the base of the brain, there is a spongy mass. And all of these things come into play automatically as soon as the legs are open, the front legs are open, and the head goes down. This protects the giraffe. Otherwise, the blood would blast out of its head. It would kill the giraffe. And so this is how God has put it in place in order to protect this animal from dying. But you could imagine that if any part of the giraffe's physicality was not completely fully developed, that the giraffe would not survive. Imagine a giraffe that didn't have the valves in its neck. Or when it opened its legs, the heart didn't slow down. You see, on any of these things, if none of those things were in place right at the beginning, fully functional and fully developed in the beginning, giraffes would never survive. They would not have made it. And that is an evolution, friend. That's pointing us to creation. That's pointing us to God. In the beginning, God created everything perfectly. There has never been a time when a giraffe only had a small heart. There has never been a time when a giraffe only had a short neck. There's never been a time when a giraffe never had the valves in its neck, or the heart didn't slow down when its legs spread. In other words, the giraffe has been fully equipped and functional from the time it came on planet Earth. In Genesis chapter 1, it tells us, let us make who? Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. The Bible tells us that mankind was created in the image of God. And when we look at mankind, we see how remarkable we actually are. Consider the human brain. Just consider the human brain. The human brain has about 10,000 million nerve cells. Each nerve cell puts out about 10 to 100,000 connecting fibres, which make contact with other nerve cells in the brain. The total number of connection is about 10,000 billion, or 10 to the power of 15. So the total number of connections in the human brain is 10,000 billion. Now that is a huge number. And to get an understanding of how big that number is, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that we have a heavily wooded forest. And this forest it commences in Sydney, it goes all the way west to Adelaide. And from the south, it commences in Melbourne and goes all the way north as far as Newcastle. It is set out in a perfect square. All right. And so, when we think about this heavily wooded forest, imagine that every square kilometre has 85,000 trees. So every square kilometre has 85,000 trees. And every one of those trees has 100,000 leaves. That'll give you a bit of an idea of the number of connections in the human brain. 10 to the power of 15. That is 10 to the power of 15 leaves. 10,000 billion leaves, or 10,000 billion connections. But if it was a forest, it would cover from Sydney all the way across to Adelaide, from Melbourne all the way up to Newcastle. And when we think about the complexity of the human brain and the way from there it gives us all of our motor movements, it helps, it actually is the source of our taste, it is the source of our sight and our hearing, our touch, our feel, all these sort of things, and what a remarkable device it is. And let's not even begin to start talking about the complexities of the human eye. And if any part of the human eye wasn't fully developed and functioned, we would never see. You know, so evolutionary science teaches that at one stage, you know, mankind was walking around just with indentations where the eyes were going to be. I mean, a fair-minded person could not possibly take this theory seriously. But when you look at the human body, oh yes, certainly. The Bible tells us in Psalms 139 verse 14, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, because we are made in the image of God. You know, evolutionary science talk in terms of millions and millions of years, and they're saying that given enough time, any of these things could happen. Well, could it really? Could it really? Imagine that we have a human body, and we don't have to imagine it. There it is. There. The Bible says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. But let's embrace evolutionary thought for a moment, and that it took millions of years to evolve. It'd be a bit like going to a scrap metal yard and then